We at VLF function on the lines similar to other established festivals across the country, with a difference that we host non-fiction writing authors. In continuum to our tradition, non-fiction in action, we organized successful year-long run-up events, and today marks the last day of the annual conclave for literature lovers. This spectacular annual literary festival brings the sweetest treat for you, the dearest audience, wherein you will witness illuminating discussions encompassing various walks of life, from science to sports, business to culinary skills, history to current affairs, corporate culture to cinema, banking, finance, armed forces, and many more. With a heart full of gratitude, we thank all our partners for making this event a dream turned into reality. Mahametro, Infocepts, Crossword, Essay Digital Films, Naivedyam, SMS Invocare, Persistent, AD Photography, Parva Khaitan Foundation, Alag Angle, Help Links, and Billboards. Now, I request everyone to allow some rest to your digital gadgets and switch them off, please. Now, with the distractions out, I hope you will garner life-altering wisdom from the upcoming conversations. Let's widen our horizons and embrace some new perspectives. I introduce Mr. Brij Sarda as moderator of this session. He is founder, head of MediGrace at Nagpur, a pioneer healthcare advertising and training company in central India. He is involved with the marketing and branding of pharmaceutical products and training the field of professionals. Mr. Brij completed his PG in pharmacy and later did his PG in business management from Mudra Institute of Communications, Ahmedabad. Brij Bhai has traveled across the globe and conducted more than 1,500 training workshops. He is engaged in many social, intellectual, and professional forums and organizations. Please welcome Mr. Brij Sarda for this interesting session. Friends, now this is the time to know our author for the session, writer of Winning Culture, Major General Neeraj Bali. I take the opportunity to introduce Major General Neeraj Bali, a Sena Medal awardee with 4 decades of service in armed forces. He had an impactful career and continues even after retirement. He is now a motivational speaker, leadership trainer, and startup mentor. He runs an advisory agency named Landscape Advisors to guide and work with family-owned, mid-sized startups to inculcate leadership skills in budding entrepreneurs. Major General Bali is managing a rural education society having 92 schools and colleges with the spirit of giving back to the society. Sir, we are really honored to have you here to talk about your recent work. Now I request moderator of the session, Mr. Brij Sarda, to escort our author of the day to the dais. Please welcome him with a big applause. Thank you, everyone. Now, over to Brij Bhai for the session. And friends, this session will culminate into final panel discussion also about the armed forces. So please continue here. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Good afternoon to all of you. This has been always an inspiration when we have any army personnel around us. Since yesterday, I've been interacting with Major General Neeraj Bali. And whenever as a civilian we meet any army personnel, we definitely seek respect within our soul. But at the same time, I normally also feel that among ourselves, we rarely see the people in our circle that they have joined army. So that was a curious question to begin with this program. I would like to pose upon to Major General Neeraj Bali. Sir, what, I mean, during childhood, what actually inspired you rather to join an Indian army, and how the journey was? Because it's been 4 decades he served in uniform for the Indian army.
Thank you, Bridge. I just want to make a quick little correction to the bio. I used to manage a rural education society in Maharashtra, which had 92 schools and colleges, 42,000 children. I no longer do that. I'm doing a bunch of other things, so I just wanted to get that record straight. Okay, so, some of the biggest decisions of life are taken at the point when the information you have is minimum or inadequate. Whom to marry, which college to join, which stream to take, which job to take. And life has a crazy way of turning out. It has its momentum of its own. I was a medical student in a Punjabi medium school, had never spoken a sentence of English when I went for the interview for NDA, and had zero idea what the army was. Till my physics teacher told me in Punjabi, I'll say this in English, he said, I think you look very good in uniform. You should join the army. I think somewhere in the subconscious, the thought of impressing girls might have been on my mind. And I said, he said, you should join the NDA. And I said, sir, what is NDA? And the struggle just behind his eyes told me that he didn't know the full form. He said, NDA is a 5-star hostel for army officers. Never has a bigger lie been told to me. NDA is not a 5-star hostel. It's a damn concentration camp and a jail combined. And I never forgot the teacher or, what happened to me after I joined. We filled up the forms, took it to my parents, who looked surprised, and they didn't know what I was signing up for. And two of us, a guy called Surinder Singh Chikara and I, both country bumpkins, appeared, passed, joined, and both retired as Major Generals. So, no medicals profession for us. The closest I came to doing surgery was on the battlefield. That's the background.
That's interesting. I mean, can you narrate certain incidents across these 4 decades? I mean, 4 decades you served for the Indian Army. But some element that differentiate between a civilian and the Indian Army, that normally we feel it's a discipline. That's one thing we normally. But other than discipline, anything else that in journey you could have highlighted?
Yeah, so it'll be probably hard to pick incidents like that, because one of the greatest blessings of being in the army, and I have a lot of senior veterans sitting here, they'll vouch for it. One of the greatest blessings of serving in the army is that you don't lead an ordinary boring life. There is no 9 to 5. Every week, every month, every year is going to give you a memory. And we are, after all, an amalgam of our memories. That's what we become at the end of our lives. So it's a great blessing. The army gives you a lot of new things. I think in the course of this conversation, many stories will come out. So probably I will not jump at that. But I will tell you the very first day I landed up in my unit, I had taken a bus from Chandigarh to Delhi, a train from Delhi to New Jalpaiguri, a change of train from there to Tinsukia, a 3-ton truck to Sadia Ghat, a boat from Sadia to Sekhwa Ghat, another 3-ton to Digaru Nala, an elephant ride across the Nala, and then there was a vehicle waiting from the other side which took me all the way to my unit for those 4-5 days, right? And when I reached there, the whole place was pitch dark. And I, with my entire baggage, my mom had very lovingly given me a lot of stuff, including an iron. कि बेटे गंदे कपड़े मत पहनना, वहाँ जाके प्रेस खुद ही कर लेना. And I landed there and I said, आज बिजली नहीं क्या? He said, यहाँ तो बिजली आई नहीं आज तक. There was no electricity, there was no generator. Everybody had a lantern, except for the 2IC who was a privileged man. He had a Petromax lamp. So that was the start of my grand career. Yeah.
That's nice. Sir, the book in discussion today, I mean the winning culture. मैं आपको सबको बताना चाहूँगा कि ये बुक मैंने अभी जब पढ़ी, क्योंकि मॉडरेट करना था, So recently I came across some statistics that in last 3-4 months in India, this book is ranked among the top 10 bestsellers. And the latest yesterday it is a 4th bestseller book. And obviously it was again the question came to my mind कि एक आर्मी से रिटायर होने के बाद व्यक्ति क्या क्या कर सकता है, और उसी आर्मी के पूरे इंस्पिरेशन को, पूरे नरेशन को या अपने एक्सपीरियंस को अपने पेन में लिखना और किताब में लिखना. Before I pose the question, I want to tell the audience that this book is full of all the factual stories, research stories, so many incidences about army, how they work and what culture. So my question, sir, regarding this, when you retired from Indian Army, what actually prompted you to narrate these stories, meet so many people, pen it down and publish in the form of a book?
Okay, so the thought didn't come to my mind immediately after I retired. When I retired from Pune as GOC, I had a single point goal in life, never to retire. I've kept that goal to date. And I became first CEO of a rural education society, then a CEO of an engineering company. I'm not an engineer, but some reckless people appointed me and we did well. This thought, I can't say there was a particular day when the thought came, but the closest I can come to telling you is, in 2016, I went to IIM Ahmedabad to give a talk. And at the end of the talk, one young smart girl got up and said, "You tell me, आप लोग हमसे इतने फर्क क्यों हैं? How are you so different? You guys are willing to die. You are, you don't get bonus at the end of the year. बाहर तो सब लोग bonus की बात करते हैं. तो ये आप में ऐसा क्या अंतर है?" So I said, "You are a smart girl in IIM. मैं तो 11वीं पास हूँ. मुझे बताओ, आपका क्या आंसर है?" तो she said, "It is because you are more patriotic." I have asked this question from several audience after that, and I'll tell you I get the same answers. The first answer always is because you people are more patriotic. Some people say you are more dedicated. Some people say you have passion. All sorts of things they say. All are completely inaccurate. Nobody in the army talks about patriotism. मैंने patriotism नाम या देश का तिरंगा फैला रहा है आंखों में, वो कहानी देखी नहीं थी कभी भी. ये मैंने बाद में आके बाहर ट्विटर पे देखी और अक्षय कुमार की पिक्चरों में देखी. फौज के अंदर we are not more patriotic than you are or anybody else is. We are definitely not more dedicated or less dedicated. I have two sons, both married, and 4 of my children now are in corporate sector. They work far harder and with far more dedication than I ever did. तो वो कहानी नहीं है. The answer to this question is what triggered the book. The reason why ordinary people do extraordinary things in the army is because every organization, every company, every club, every political party, every family has a culture. You are driven by that culture. You've seen how families behave differently under crisis? You are driven by the culture which colors you. You can grow that culture thoughtfully, like army has done, or you can let it grow like wild grass. But there will be culture. What is culture? Culture is what collectively makes us do stuff. When you go to a government office, for example, and you land up at 11:30, office ka time hai 10 baje, Babu has not come on his chair. Then he comes after 15 minutes, hangs his tiffin, walks off to chat with somebody. When he comes back, you say, "मेरी file," and he says, "अरे सर कौन सी फाइल, देखो यार ढेर लगा है फाइलों का, आप एक हफ्ते के बाद आ जाना." Why does he do so? Because it's the culture of that office. And why is it the culture? Because it works for the people who work there. He's going to get his pension, he's going to get his pay. No one is going to reward him if he gives you a file quickly, and nobody is going to punish him if he does not. That becomes the culture. The same culture won't happen in HDFC or ICICI or some other bank. We veterans were blessed. We joined an organization which had a robust, beautifully crafted culture right from the British days. We inherited it and we tweaked it to Indianness to a point where we did things without thinking, it's automatic. It is so deeply enshrined in our heads, in our fabric, that is what drives people to go up the slopes of Kargil and die, and not to think of abandoning their unit, not to think of running away. That's all there is to it. So then I thought, since I had been a CEO of a company that time, And I said, everybody outside talks about culture today. Bridge was talking to me. He said, buzzword तो है दुनिया में. कंपनियों में लोग बहुत करते हैं, हमारा कल्चर ठीक नहीं है, हमारी अकाउंटेबिलिटी ठीक नहीं है, गॉसिप बहुत चल रही है, पॉलिटिक्स बहुत चलती है, कॉलेजेस में भी लोग बात करते हैं ऐसी. But people don't seem to do anything about it. You know why? Because it is foolishly thought that culture doesn't reflect in your top line and bottom line, in your revenue statement, in your balance sheet. It does. It does. That's how the balance sheet of the army is so good. So I thought, is there a case for writing a book which draws some universal lessons from the army and presents it to the world outside? And that's how the book was written. And then I passed on the manuscript to 15 top businessmen whom I didn't know and said, would you like to read it and say if I'm making sense? A couple of them wrote back and said, sorry, we don't read books. I mean, we don't read books and endorse, like Azim Premji and Nandan Nilekani. And others who read, they said it makes sense.
Sir, I mean, thank you for this elaboration about the culture, but that attracts to another question. The culture of army and the culture in the business. You also worked in so many corporates as an advisory, as a CEO also. I'm sure definitely the corporate culture requires more of a कि आज छुट्टी चाहिए सर, आज हमको मतलब PL चाहिए, CL होना चाहिए, rewards है, incentives है. So there should be definitely a gross difference between the army culture and the corporate culture. This book, how does it connect? I mean, what do you see? What's the difference between these two cultures and how then
Sure.
it can be brought into
Great question.
execution?
Great question. Okay. So, it is not my case. It is not the theme of my song that anybody should try to replicate the army. That would be a nonsensical idea. Army has a different environment. The corporate sector or the business sector has a different environment. For example, the army has no profit motive. The corporate sector cannot exist without profit motive. In the army, we don't care for numbers. We care for getting the job done, right? And there are so many other differences. By and large, the workforce in the army is stable. Attrition is low, unless there's a Kargil war. And in the corporate sector, is the name of the game. My point is this. First of all, realize from the army that you need a robust culture. Focus on it. Put it in the center of your attention. Don't just talk about it. Don't just splash it on a poster and put it on the wall and say, this is our mission statement. This is our culture. It's not going to work. Put it in the center of it. And how do you put it? As part of the thing I've done in the book. In fact, chapter 8 is all about how to change your culture. But where I have tried to build a bridge between the army and the corporate sector is, there are certain universal attributes of leadership, of motivation, of team building, of connecting with each other, of having relational attitudes towards each other rather than transactional, which the corporate sector will do well to learn, right? So I am only saying, look at the universal attributes, and I can, when you permit me, I will tell you a story which will put this question at ease completely. So that's my point. They're not similar. Look at your culture and look at the universal attributes of the army, about leadership, about various things, and build your own culture.
I connect the corporate culture, and I also worked in corporate for so long. People in corporate, they normally work for promotions, they change the companies. The element of loyalty is only limited to 2 years, 3 years, for whatever the long time we serve in the company. Now this loyalty versus the loyalty to the Indian army, I mean army culture is about loyalty to the country or to the Indian army itself. And within this loyalty, people are ready to die. I read in this book that Kargil war, आपको बताऊं कि 529 people have died in soldiers died in the Kargil war, and 1300 plus people have actually wounded. And there are so many individual stories in this, but therefore the second chapter is why people are dying in Indian army, and even the opposition also speaks about
why
this.
are officers dying?
Why? I'm sorry.
That is the title of the.
Yes. Why officers? I'm sorry. Why officers die? That's the title in book number 2. I request you, sir, can you elaborate on that? Why officers die? In this.
Okay. Let me first tell you real quick that the soldiers and the officers of the army are of course loyal to the army and the country. there's no two ways about it. But that is not the main loyalty. They're mainly loyal to their unit. So, Kal Majumdar would have been loyal to the Punjab battalion where he served. General Gadre would have been, loyal to the regiment he commanded in sugar sector. Okay? We are loyal to our units. So there is not such a great difference of being loyal to a company and to be loyal to a unit. We also move from unit to unit. We don't stay stable in the same unit. So the difference is not that stark. Now we come to the chapter. When you get news from Kashmir or Valley or Northeast or elsewhere where there has been an operation, you normally hear stories like, headlines like, 1 officer, 2 Jawans killed, 1 officer, 3 Jawans injured. You always hear this. Have you ever wondered that when the ratio of officers to Jawans is 1:100, why is there always one damn officer getting killed? Now, I studied this problem as a staff officer in Kashmir. I was not analyzing this issue, I was analyzing where are the casualties taking place and how we can reduce them. It's a job given to me by a Lieutenant General. And after I studied everything in stark detail about what time of the day more people get killed, how do they get killed, what is their background, when did they go on leave, all schmozzle, I realized this. In the tactics in the army, when you go to war or you go into battlefield or you go to look for militants, the sequence is, the first couple of guys are your sharpshooters called scouts, then there is 1/3 of the column, then there is the officer and his team, and then there is 2/3 of the forge behind. The officer is well up to get information and to take decisions, right? So he's well positioned, well ahead. That's the way it should be. But what is happening in Kashmir, what is happening in Indian Army is, the officer is wanting to be the number one physically. I have seen officer after officer after officer pushing the men back and say, "Tune marna hai? Piche ho. Pehle main jaunga." Is it good? The jury is out on that. In fact, General Panag has recently written an article criticizing this aspect, that we are losing officers because people are just wanting to lead physically in front. Okay?
That's leading from the front.
That is leading from the front physically. We're not supposed to do this physically. But this is what officers are doing it. And the central thing to learn from this for each one of us is this. The number one thing that motivates people to work in a company, even in a family, is when they feel safe under you. When they feel he's going to protect my interest, he's going to take care of me. The day of the crisis, he'll be with me. I trust him. In the army, officers have taken upon themselves to even save their lives by sticking their head out, by going in front, and that is why there are so many casualties. Okay? So that was the genesis of the chapter, that this leading by example or leading from front is one of the central tenets of the armed forces, particularly the army. And that's an attribute. Why is it not applicable to the corporate sector? Can anyone tell me? Of course it's applicable. Life is far easier in corporate sector. Nobody is getting killed. Why can't somebody lead by example in the corporate sector? Why can't there be a principal who says, I am going to be more competent, I am going to be a better professor, I am going to actually physically take classes, I am going to protect the junior most professor if he is right, and I am going to be unbiased the day of the bonus. That's leading by example. That's the chapter.
So there are a lot of uncertainties. I'm sure it happens in Indian Army also. Like जैसे war में fight करना एक strategy हो सकती है, but then Indian Army has to take a lot of trouble internally when they want to fight with militants, because militants are spread across the country with the civilian dresses. So this book also mentions that fighting the war sometimes relatively has more easier, more strategically we can fight the war, but finding militants is more difficult. It talks about various uncertainties, and then Indian Army, how they handle the uncertainties, how they handle the kind of things which are not being planned, the things that are sudden, and that too happens in their life also. So the learning which you can highlight, the strategies which you can highlight to deal with ambiguous situations or these kind of situations which are unpredictable.
Sure. Before I answer the question about ambiguity and uncertainty, which plagues everybody's life sitting here. Army is no different. I want to tell you about why is it harder to fight militants, though that's really not the crux of the book, or it's not the theme. Please remember, wherever there is asymmetric competition, where there is a strong party and a weak party, if the weak party follows the same tactics as the strong party, the weak party will lose. So the weak party always follows a different set of rules. Militants don't wear uniform, they are not identifiable, they don't move in Fauji vehicles, they don't have a camp, they don't follow the law of the land, they carry AK-47s under the Firan, they don't look like Faujis, they follow different rules. Same thing happens to you in business. You have an established business, somebody sits in the garage is going to greet you. He is following different rules. He not doing compliances. He is not wasting his time on ISO this and ISO that. That is how even countries like Vietnam and China and us and started beating the US. We play by different rules. Okay? So that is asymmetry. And that's the answer to the question which people often ask, you guys are so professional, why can't you beat the crap out of these militants? 20 saal ho gaye, 30 saal ho gaye. It's a different ball game altogether. Now come to uncertainty, and there is a great lesson for all of us here. Everyone's life is uncertain. Life is meant to be uncertain. When people moan and tell me, I'm also a life coach by the way, people come to me and say, मेरी ज़िंदगी बड़ी मुश्किल है, ज़िंदगी आसान क्यों नहीं है? I always tell them, अगर तुम्हारी ज़िंदगी मुश्किल है, तो congratulations, तुम जिंदा हो. The first thing is to accept that life will be difficult every single day and it will be uncertain. Now let's come to the uncertainty. Listen to this dichotomy. ये जो अजीब चीज़ मैं बताने जा रहा हूँ, फौज जो है वो नीट कैंटोनमेंट्स में रहती है, सीधी लाइनों पे चलती है, जूते चमका के चलती है, वर्दी सीधी पहनती है, लिखते भी एक प्रॉपर एक ऑर्डर में है. एवरीथिंग इज ऑर्डरलीनेस, isn't it? Everything is completely orderly. जो फौज 30-40 साल ऑर्डरली रहती है, वो अचानक लड़ाई में अनसर्टेनिटी से जूझने के लिए इतनी अच्छी कैसे हो जाती है? You should be confused because you're only used to good order, and in war nothing is good order. When the first bullet is fired, the plan goes out of the window. The plan becomes the template. It's like what Mike Tyson said, the boxer. He said, everybody has a plan till you are hit in the face. Then there's no plan. Okay?
Right.
Now, when you enter a jungle, for example, as a CO, I commanded an anti-terrorist battalion. When you enter a jungle at night, it's pitch dark, and somebody fires an AK-47, you don't know who the hell is firing, who's doing it, what is the situation. Militants have fired, your guy has fired, nobody's talking on the radio set, who's got shot, what is the thing to do? And you are required to make sense out of chaos and take a decision. Okay? Which is the primary role of every parent and every person sitting here, to make sense out of the chaos of life and make decisions. So how does the army achieve this? I didn't know the answer till I wrote the book. I was educated by General VP Malik, one of the ex-chiefs. I threw the question at him. मैंने कहा सर हम कैसे करते हैं? वहाँ तो कश्मीर में तो we are all very good, और वैसे हम बिल्कुल we want to be everything straight. He said ये तो बड़ा simple है. Our minds have become so orderly that when there is a crisis, certain things are automatically taken care of. Our rest of the RAM is free to deal with the uncertainty part. It is the equivalent of a person who has sorted out his habits and sorted out his ethics. The day of the crisis, वो उसको problem नहीं होगी. The day he is offered a bribe, उसको वो problem नहीं होगी. वो ethics is sorted out. उसने वो नहीं करना, चाहे जो मर्जी हो. Isn't it? So, that is the lesson. If you are a person of great habits, and if you are a company of great processes, then the day of the uncertainty, you are more likely to be able to make good decisions, because your energy will not go waste in tackling with this riffraff. And the second part, which we will talk about, maybe another question, I would love to tell you the story that is bubbling in my head, is uncertainty is beaten with great leadership. It's leaders who beat great uncertainty by not panicking, by not displaying fear. Everybody is fearful, but not displaying fear.
That's wonderful. Probably back of the mind, the culture is there to handle it chaos and things. This book has lot many such stories. और मैं आपको बताऊं कि कल सर प्रयागराज में थे and he was addressing the audience on the platform of TEDx. Before that he was in Vietnam. So addressing TEDx, then came to Delhi, then came to Pune, then came to Nagpur. And he was fresh at the morning 7 o'clock, even though he landed at 3 o'clock in the night. Now throughout the journey, whatever the interaction I had, he has been telling stories just now as he's been telling us. Or a book bhi, it's a sort of compendium of so many stories. So definitely as a life coach, he has lot many to talk about a story and give the message through storytelling. But I want to understand from you, sir, is this storytelling, the power of storytelling is also relevant to corporate? Now, can the corporate training or the corporate culture be built on the power of storytelling?
Corporate sector is missing a big trick when it comes to storytelling. Some of us were talking today, we were discussing this, I think Vishakha had this question with me. I'll tell you why this is powerful. First of all, some of the stories I might tell now, some of you have heard them. Certainly, Chandrasutta has heard the stories, so my apologies, you're going to hear the stories again. I have been told by my friends who want to make me happy, you are a storyteller. But my wife says the same thing in a very different language. She says, तुम्हें तो खाली कहानियाँ सुनानी आती हैं, काम तो कोई आता नहीं है. Okay, that's my tribute to my wife. Now let's come to the storytelling. You know what happened in Kargil in 1999. So Pakistanis came and occupied our posts on hilltops, which were at the heights of 15, 18, 20,000 feet, where temperatures dipped to minus 30, 40, 50, whatever. And they quietly came and sat down there. We used to vacate them in winters because it's hard to stay there. Pakistanis, it was an unwritten rule, but they played clever and they came and sat down there, knowing fully well that nobody can attack up the slope on bare hills where even walking 5 steps sucks the oxygen out of your lungs. Now attacking uphill, getting killed, they thought this is not possible, and therefore the line of control will move forward and they would have captured some area without firing a shot. Of course they had misread the culture of Indian Army. Of course we captured everything back. We lost those 529 people. Another 1100 got maimed, but we took everything back, as we would. Within that, 2 Rajrif, a battalion, 2nd Rajrif, they had captured Tololing, one of the first victories we had, at great cost. They lost people, and so after their battle was over, the unit was told, "Abhi tumhara kaam ho gaya. Ab tum jaake aaram karo, you can go." And they were very happy. But then suddenly they were told, "Sorry, there is another troublesome peak called Lone Hill. वो भी आप ही को capture करना है." This attack was led by a guy called Major Mohit Saxena. They started climbing. It is night, maybe around 1 o'clock, pitch dark. From top, the Pakistanis can sense something is happening, so they are firing down below. And suddenly, Major Saxena's company discovers that they can't climb any further because there is no way to climb. It's too straight. So one of the young officers, Captain, he has a long Naga name, I can't pronounce it. In fact, even 2 Rajrif, nobody could pronounce it. They used to call him Captain Nembu. So Captain Nembu said, he was a Naga, he said, "I can climb." He took 5 or 6 people. He tried climbing. Then he discovered he couldn't, so he threw his shoes off, boots off, put his weapon around his neck and started climbing on all fours. And they managed to, and when the Jawans saw the officers do it, they also threw their shoes off. They managed to get pretty close to the Pakistani post, but unfortunately they all got killed. Now, Major Mohit Saxena's party started climbing from another side. And then something very strange happened. They started hearing this noise of gad, 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 gad. What the Pakistanis were doing were, they were rolling boulders down the slope.
Oh.
Huge boulders. Now it's pitch dark, you don't know what is happening. And Saxena said, I suddenly saw a Jawan disappearing. And then another Jawan disappearing. Jawans were thrown 100 to 200 feet down, somebody with broken spines, somebody with broken shoulders, somebody with broken hips, crying. He said, I heard a Jawan cry out for his mother. But there was nothing to be done. And so there they were. And then there was one guy called Last Naik Jayaprakash, who got hit and half his face got blown off. And they managed to put a bandage or something around his face. They knew he's dying. So they just put him on a stone and he said, आप अपना काम करो, मेरा जो होगा होगा, मैं आपको मिल जाऊंगा दोबारा. So Saxena came down, he radioed the CO, some help came. They started giving morphine injections to the boys to ease their pain. And in the meanwhile, he had got another 8, 10 or 15 soldiers from another company. So I interviewed Saxena at length on Zoom call. In fact, for this book, I interviewed everybody personally. And there are no Paramveer Chakra stories in the book. There are stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, because that is what is culture. I said, Mohit, what was the thought in your mind at that point of time? You were what, 30 years old or less? It is 3 o'clock at night, people are dying, and you don't know what to do. So what was the thought in your mind? I'll tell you 2 things. On the Zoom call, I saw tears freely rolling down his eyes. This is 23 years after the war. He said, sir, I felt so bad. The soldiers are like my children, and I couldn't do anything more for them. I said, all right. But what was your thought? What made you take the next decision? He said, sir, rattling inside my head was the conversation that we have in 2 Rajrev every time we sit on a bar, every time we have a function, every time our regimental history is read, every time people say only one thing. And they say, 2 Rajrev has never lost a battle in 175 years. He says, that's the only story we've been told all our lives. So I said, it's not going to start today. They climbed, they attacked, and they captured. That's the power of an idea, the power of a story. In the army, does it surprise you that we have museums, we have war memorials, we have regimental histories, we have war diaries, and God knows when officers sit in the evening on the bar, all they talk about is Paltan mein kya hua tha. उस साल ये हुआ था, उस साल में वो हुआ था, उस वेटर ने ये किया था, मैंने ये किया, मैंने ग्रेनेड फेंका तो ऐसा हो गया. This is what we talk. Now, tell me, in the corporate sector, so many things happen. They're not as dramatic as this, but so much happens.
Right.
You win a bid against all odds. You stayed up 2 nights and overcome a crisis. You've secured a deal beyond your imagination. Why are those stories not recorded? Why are they not told? Why don't people say, we are Tatas, this is what we do, we are Indigo, these are our stories. So when I suggest this to people, they say, bhai hamari to population aati jati rehti hai. All right, but the institution remains. Hum bhi to aa gaye fauj chhod ke, but the Indian army is still there telling stories. That's the power of the storytelling.
The story of pride within the organization, the story of achievements within the organization can help the further. एक book में एक और chapter है. The name of the chapter is the support of families. I mean, not the name, it revolves around the support of families. And we also wonder as a civilian, the person in the army maybe has to fight the war and be away from the family for at a stretch, maybe months or the weeks kind of. Now, can an officer, whatever the cadre the person is in the Indian Army, be more successful, be achieve in their goals if the families are not supporting, and in what extent the sacrifice level of the families does happen in Indian Army? I mean, that's also the chapter you dedicated in this book.
No, the support of the family obviously is inestimable. My children have practically grown up under my wife's watch. But there is more to it. The army weaves the families into its own fabric. We do not socialize stag man to man. We socialize family to family.
Nice.
We have relations. You know, I'm sure all the officers sitting here will vouch for it. For us, those relationships go 30, 40 years. We never forget anybody. If an officer or a soldier dies, the family is still invited for the raising day. And some of them come for decades. Nobody's ever forgotten. The net result is, and the families are taken care, the net result is that the family starts identifying itself with the army. Let me give you a quick example and you judge for yourself. There are at least 50 to 60 cases in the Indian Army today where a lady, having lost her husband in operations, has fought her way into the army to become an officer.
Wonderful.
There is no quota system that if a husband dies, the wife will get a job. You have to be fit, you have to appear for an interview, for the test, and you have to take all the ragada in the officer training academy. One such lady is a CEO's wife, Colonel Mahadik, who belongs to this part of the world.
Yes.
His wife Swati was heavyweight, had never walked more than 200 meters as per her own saying, and she fought, and she was hugely over age. She went all the way to the defense ministry, fought and joined. But the most telling story I will tell you is a young girl called Nitika Kaul. Nitika Kaul, I've never met her, I've seen her pictures, looks like a model. Modern girl, married a guy called Major Dondial. 10 months into marriage, Major Dondial died in an operation in Kashmir. Nitika had never gone to the army unit. She didn't know the army culture at all. And she was working for TCS. And they had promised her a posting to London. Nitika joined the army. So after she became an officer, I interviewed her and I said, yours is not a case of culture. तुम्हें तो फौज का पता ही नहीं था. You must have joined because you loved your husband, Vibhuti. So that's why you joined. She said, no, sir. My husband was the only child of an army family. You know, we have families where our generations, like General Gadre is third generation into the army. There are people. He says, he was an army person's child. My mother-in-law requested me. She said, I've lost my son. Now you take the mantle.
Oh.
Which organization can you tell me in this world where you lose a loved one and you start supporting that organization after that person passes away? What is so hard for the corporate sector to start looking at families? They even have the resources of inviting them over, of building relationships. The problem is, we in the corporate sector have decided that we are transactional. हमें काम से मतलब है, ये सब चोचलेबाजी है. It is not.
That's मतलब ये कौन सा जज्बा होता है कि I mean losing somebody and then again joining the army from the same family, it's very difficult to find.
That's culture.
I mean, definitely salute to that passion. Now talking about the culture of the Indian Army, what the message of the book is, and connecting it to the learning from the business culture. But whatever we learn, it is most of the time it is difficult to execute. I mean, there is a sentence in this book, it says that the best of the strategies, the culture in the organization is not sufficient enough to execute this strategy. So, can you tell us the few steps the organization should execute in the for the execution of the culture?
Right.
The few steps they should develop to execute like?
Great. So more than a step, I've been dying to tell a story. I will tell you the story quickly. And that will clarify this issue altogether.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I continue.
So, you're right. You can make any grand strategy, any grand plan. It's not going to work if the culture of the organization doesn't support it. Okay? You can just keep talking about it. Here's a story I'm very fond of telling, and I'm going to tell this. And yesterday I said this in TEDx also. 4th of June 1997, when I was a commanding officer of a battalion in Kashmir, in the morning we were going somewhere in vehicles. We were on a Kacha road. Under the road, militants had planted explosive. It's called improvised explosive device. It's activated with a remote. My vehicle went past it. For some reason, either it didn't work or they were not there. 10 minutes later, a vehicle of my battalion got blown. The crater was 8 foot deep. The vehicle went up above the eucalyptus trees, took 2 tumbles in the air, crashed against the gravel, instantly killed Major Mohit Vig and 2 soldiers of my battalion. One young officer, 20 years old, Ravi Loganathan, and 2 soldiers were trapped in that steel. If you see the picture, it's a mangled steel. The militants started firing on that vehicle to kill everybody else. We heard the bang, we turned around, then somebody said, गाड़ियों में मत जाओ, ये और भी लगाया होगा इन्होंने. So we carried our AK-47s and we were running towards the firing. And in the meanwhile, this youngster, Ravi Loganathan, had crawled out and he was also firing all over the place, totally dazed, bleeding. As we were running, now those of you who have seen senior army officers, and there are 3 sitting in front of me, if you had seen Brigadier Anand in his uniform, you would have seen that colonels and above wear a red colored thing on the collar. It's got a collar dog, or some people call it lipstick on the collar, whatever. It is not to be, this distinguishing mark is not to be worn in battlefield. It is not to be worn in Kashmir during operations. Because obviously the enemy will know who's the boss. You get killed first. मुझे CO बने 10 दिन हुए थे. मैं नया नया दूल्हा था. मुझे बड़ा शौक था पहनने का, मैंने पहना हुआ था. तो मेरे साथ जो ऑफिसर मेरे साथ दौड़ रहा था AK उठा के, उसने मुझे कहा, सर, you should not be wearing it, take it off. Somebody will not take a shot at you. I said, yeah, I will take it off. But my mind was full of lot of confusion because people were dying and I had to take decisions, and so I didn't take it off immediately. We must have run another 200 steps. Running next to me was my unit's barber, Roop Lal, in uniform, carrying AK-47. I will repeat the words he said to me. He said, sir, एक बात करूं? मैं रुक गया, मैंने कहा बोलो. कहता, सर, ये जो लाल लाल लगा के घूमते हो ना सर, ये कोई बहादुरी थोड़ा है, ये तो आपको लागू भी नहीं है. अभी ना आपको कोई ठोक देगा और भगदड़ मच जाएगी, देखना. तो मैंने कहा, रूपलाल, मैं समझ गया, मैं उतारने वाला हूँ. कहते, ये सलाह नहीं है मेरी सर. सर, आज तो कोई जान भी ले लेना आपकी, आज मत उतारना. आज नहीं सर, 3 महीने मत उतारना. क्योंकि सर आप हो लीडर, आप हो CO, लोग आपकी तरफ देखते हैं, आपको तो उदाहरण सेट करना है सर. लोग कहेंगे 1-2 लोग मरते हैं, हमारा CO घबरा जाता है. Can you think of a more beautiful advice on leading by example coming from the lowest rung in the army, that die if you have to, but stay true to the example. And of course, on the lighter side, I didn't take them off for 3.5 years. And people used to keep asking me, तो ये क्या पहन के घूमता है? मैंने कहा वो बार्बर ने बोला था. मुहूर्त इसमें कुछ शुभ है, इसमें कुछ शुभ होगा. So the point I'm making is this: what is it so difficult about leading by example that the corporate sector can't learn from this? Right? Why can't we set examples in our families, in our colleges, in our schools? The problem is people think words are enough. Words will not cut. Even your children will not follow you after a certain point. Okay, words are not enough. If words were enough, every politician would be worshipped. Words are not enough. Every CEO says, customer centric hai, human centric hai. It's not enough. Set an example. That's how it works. And that is how strategies work.
Exactly. Connected, I'll share one incident from the book. The book has a lot of stories of the strategies of Titan, Indigo, then Cadbury. There are many companies and Arvind Fashions, etc. I was reading about Indigo incidents. Indigo, आप सबको पता है कि the company focus on the on-time airline. It's been since the inception. Indigo is always talking about on-time airline. So the entire structure, entire execution of Indigo was based on the on-time. But how did it started? And that's what I appreciate that Major General has mentioned that. The interview of the people when they started recruiting the Indigo individuals, the criteria was people who came on the time. We should recruit those people. They will, regard. Such is an example how culture sets in. It's not about just telling this, but training this entire staff for the new culture. Exactly, the book mentions कि हम में से ही कुछ लोग आर्मी में जाते हैं, तो हम लोग सिविलियंस ही आर्मी में बन जाते हैं. तो मेरा सर आपसे अगला सवाल है कि आर्मी की ट्रेनिंग में ऐसा क्या डीएनए चेंज हो जाता है कि ट्रेनिंग में ऐसा क्या होता है कि वो एक हैबिचुअल बंदा रहता है कि सडनली वो ट्रांसफॉर्म होके ही बिकम्स अ डिफरेंट मैन ऑफ अ डिफरेंट डीएनए?
Okay, before I come to the training part, I was I was sent to USA to study by the Indian Army in a think tank. और मेरे साथ 3 पाकिस्तानी ऑफिसर थे serving. So one of them got up in the class and said, "We are not here to learn about democracy from the Americans. In our country, civilians have no leadership, and that is why the army has to run the country. And there is nothing to learn from the Americans." तो कॉफ़ी ब्रेक में उनका जो ब्रिगेडियर था, he said, "तुझे कैसा लगा ये आर्ग्यूमेंट?" मैंने कहा, सर अगर आपके सारे देश में सिविलियंस में लीडरशिप नहीं है तो आप फौजी कहाँ से लाते हो? वी आर सिविलियंस wearing uniform, that's all. But we have been changed by the culture. We are not different. Okay, we are the same people. Now, instead of just talking about training, let me very quickly summarize how the culture is formed or changed, what you can do. Whatever you will reward is what will become the culture. We are creatures of self-interest. I have seen MDs who say, क्या सर यहाँ बड़ी गॉसिप चलती है, जिसका मैं CEO था, used to tell me, sir बड़ी गॉसिप चलती है कंपनी में, and then I would say, he would call some junior level guy, make him sit in the office and gossip for 2 hours. उसे खबर लेता था पूरी. Whatever you reward will become culture. If you don't punish people when they do something wrong, it will become culture. If your SOPs and procedures say something else and you're doing something else, if your personal example is poor, you can't form a culture. You can't be a Vijay Mallya saying this company will live on austerity and then everybody sees you coming out of jets having spent 90 lakh rupees on a birthday. How will there be a culture? Okay, so culture is to be set like this. It's very hard to change. It will take a long time. There will be a lot of pushback. And training is one important, very important facet which makes you who you are. Actually, and makes the culture.
Sir, there is a connecting title in this book. I mean, the quote which I have mentioned here, Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. That is the title of the chapter also. So, can you please elaborate this, Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast?
It's a very famous quote by Peter Drucker, who is a management guru. He said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. What it means is, you can make any plan you like, you make any strategy. अगर आपका culture उसको support नहीं करेगा, you can keep talking about digitization, और culture आपका पूरा manual है, तो कैसे support होगा? strategy कैसे चलेगी आगे? ठीक है? तो मेरा conclusion इस किताब में ये था, culture and strategy should have breakfast together. No need to eat each other. Okay, so that is what the chapter is.
One more incident, we'll just come to the wrapping of this entire discussion. Indian Army, patriotism, देश के लिए लड़ना, ये सब तो बात समझ में आती है. लेकिन जब राजीव गांधी प्रधानमंत्री थे, तब इंडिया की आर्मी जाफना गई थी और एलटीटी के लिबरेशन के लिए वो फाइट कर रहे थे. तो वहाँ पर भी इसमें कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स मेंशन्ड है, ऑपरेशन पवन का मेंशन्ड है वगैरह. तो मैं जानना चाहता हूँ कि भाई अपने देश के लिए जान देना तो समझ में आती है, पर दूसरों के देश में जाकर अपनी जान देना इंडियन आर्मी को कैसे, मतलब वो क्यों ऐसा हो पाया?
फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, द कार्डिनल strength of the Indian Army is that we are apolitical and secular. Okay, we are an island within this country which doesn't care about these things, and therefore for us it doesn't matter who's the government. It is the orders, and they're going to be followed. Or the chief has the choice to quit if you don't want to follow them. You're right. When we went to Sri Lanka, we were bereft of strategy. हमें ये कह के भेजा गया था कि एलटीटी और श्रीलंका सरकार के बीच में हो गया है अभी सब कुछ, आपने खाली पीस कीपिंग करनी है. वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट बटालियन दैट वेंट 13 सिखलाए इवन कैरिड सेरेमोनियल ड्रेसेस. उनको था वहाँ जाके डिनर शिनर होगा, and 68 of those boys were killed in the first couple of days.
Sure.
But what is the lesson here? We didn't have a strategy, but the Indian Army didn't run because culture trumps strategy. You never hear people cribbing about it. You didn't have a situation where people started running away. People stood and fought literally for years, irrespective of the strategy. Right? So you can have any great strategy you like, but first focus on your culture.
एक कोट मैंने फोटो लिया था बुक से, and I want to read this, and I would end this discussion with this quote. There's a paragraph which says, if there are three words that an outsider can expect to hear most frequently from the soldiers of Indian Army, those three words are Naam, Namak, Nishan. Together these words constitute a powerful theme song, indeed the most potent of ideas that runs like a silent stream through the army's culture. It is a construct unique to the Indian Army, an unwritten yet clearly understood set of ideals that guide and motivate the conduct of soldiers during war and peace. Naam, Namak, Nishan. इस बारे में please elaborate this. I mean,
Yeah, so you know the story of Major Mohit Saxena that I gave. By the way, Mohit Saxena is now a brigadier. He's got a VRC, and the boy I said whose half face was blown was rescued, and he had some 30 surgeries in R&R hospital. They reconstructed his face. When Major Saxena went to meet him, he said, "बस एक ही दिल में वो रह जाएगी रंजिश कि शादी नहीं होगी with this kind of face." Even that happened. He is now a grandfather. So that story ended happily. To come back to your point about Naam, Namak, Nishan, you see, it's an amalgam of the traditions. We follow, for us, izzat of the unit matters. Is the only thing that matters actually. Loyalty to the unit, loyalty to your flag. I'm not talking about India's flag. The unit matters. Okay? It matters so much. The regiment of artillery, for example, where General Gadre served, इनके लिए जो flag होता है, the guns are called a flag. In 62 war, Americans had dropped some guns. They were lying in the most inhospitable terrain you can imagine. I have served there. You walk 5 steps, you're out of breath. And they were lying among rodos, on the slopes. 17 Parafield, an artillery regiment, made several attempts. Youngsters with Jawans came. Finally, they cut the guns, hauled them, brought them down, assembled them, and taken them to their center as their flag. Right? So those things really, really matter to us, and they are a very intrinsic part of the culture.
right. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, in initial conversation, in initial talks, he mentioned that कि मुझे English आती नहीं थी पहले till the time I joined, मतलब schooling का जो English रहता है. But this book, if you actually read, let me confess that every word will give you a new vocabulary. Every sentence has a new word.
You are going to drive the sales of the book down. बड़ी आसान है, मैं बता रहा हूँ आपको. इसको अंग्रेजी नहीं आती.
ये हो सकता है, लेकिन मुझे इतना अच्छा लगा कि every sentence has got the appropriate word that to be used in an appropriate sentence, and definitely a very good read. To conclude this session, we have another panel discussion lined up, where all the panelists from the army will talk about the lessons of army from the life and business. Before that, I'll take the privilege and the permission from the audience to get the signed this book from the sir. And so I would request you to, sir, please.
I will do this. Just give me another 30 seconds. So let me prove to you the point about my actual lack of English communication skills. You know, the school where I was, the medium of instruction was Punjabi. I played cricket for the school junior team. And after I had played for 1 year, I was a leg spinner. Kapil Dev joined the same team. He was 1 year junior to me. And of course he was fast and all of that, but we never imagined he was going to become what he became. And 1 year later, Kapil was sent to senior team, whereas because of my talents, I was retained in the junior team. उसके बाद मैं फौज में चला गया तो हमारी कोई कभी मुलाकात नहीं हुई. 20-25 साल बीत गए. 1995, I was in Mau. Another officer who was part of the same team went from Mau to Delhi, met Kapil and came back and said, I met Kapil, it was great, I went to his house, we drank a bottle of Red Label the whole night, we talked about school, we talked about cricket. I was dying to ask him, did Kapil remember me? भाई हम भी तो spinner थे. But I knew my heart will be broken. So I didn't ask the question. And suddenly this officer says, Kapil remembered you. I said, there. I said, what did he say? He said, I reminded him, याद है नीरज बाली हमारे साथ था? कहता याद है जिसकी अंग्रेजी अच्छी थी.
लेकिन सर कपिल थे उस जमाने में रैपिडेक्स इंग्लिश स्पीकिंग कोर्स का ऐड करते थे.
So if Kapil praises my English, it is a very low bar. Let me tell you.